philosophically, what does Superman represent to people?
A friend.
Superman 4: The Quest for Peace is an infamously terrible movie. This is something I may as well say right out of the gate. I very much doubt anybody clicking on this video is expecting me to have any different an opinion on this after all. While I've gone against general consensus in the Superman fandom here before, going out to bat for Richard Lester and expressing my doubts on the Donna cut of Superman 2, I think coming here and saying Superman 4 is good actually would have been less an honest opinion and more an act of transparent contrarianism. Because this isn't a good movie. Superman 4's shortcomings are extremely, very obvious if you're taking even a passing glance at it. It's not even like Superman 3, a film that has such a bizarre, individual personality that it's fun to pick apart the layers of strange that it is and find a diamond in the rough. Superman 4 just is what it is. This is part of why it's taken me 2 years to actually get around to watching the film and writing about it. Superman 4 is so obviously not a good movie. I was really stuck as to what exactly I could say about it. It's all been said, right? We all know why this movie doesn't work. With all my other videos, I at least had an angle I could approach it from on my own terms. With the 1978 original, there was the fun of watching a film I love wholeheartedly and poring over what might not have aged well in good faith. With Superman 2, I could honestly defend the Lester cut that I grew up with. Superman 3, I could pick apart for an hour trying to figure out what the hell it was meant to be. But with this movie, I don't know. I wasn't sure I'd be able to offer any new commentary on it. There was also an almost fear of watching the film. I'd seen the clips, sure, but there was a part of me that didn't want to watch Superman fall to this historic low. And I was, in a way, right about that. My overall takeaway from Superman 4 while watching it was an overwhelming feeling of, this isn't fun. Superman 3 is a fun watch for all its weirdness, but this film isn't. It's actually kind of sad. Not just in how far the series had fallen from the majestic heights of the 1978 film, but in that you can see that deep down under, it doesn't want to be this. You can see a good movie fighting from under the wreckage, screaming and trying to be heard. You can see the good intentions that founded this project. But to paraphrase Ned Flanders, you can't build a house on good intentions. You need more. And it's just not here. So, yeah, The Quest for Peace. Let's talk about it. After a peace summit fails to yield positive results, the world's governments gear up to increase their nuclear armaments. Saddened by this, a young boy named Jeremy writes to Superman, asking him to do something about the nuclear crisis. Superman is moved by the boy's letter, and vows to rid the planet of nuclear weapons. And so he does. He just puts them all in a net and throws them into the sun. I mean, if it works, right? Around this time, Lex Luthor's broken out of prison with the help of his nephew, Lenny. I hate Lenny. This isn't relevant to the plot summary. I just really need you all to know that I hate Lenny. Together, the two of them steal one of Superman's hairs, which is on display at the Superman Museum. Lex attaches this hair to one of the last nuclear missiles on Earth and shoots it into the sun, which inexplicably creates Nuclear Man, a being of limitless nuclear power. Sure, okay. Lex unleashes Nuclear Man to destroy Superman, and the two fight until Nuclear Man infects Superman with radiation sickness by scratching him. Superman gets the flu but eventually gets better, and the two have a final battle where it ends with Superman throwing Nuclear Man into a nuclear reactor, where he dies. Superman just murders this guy. By the way, at the same time, there's a subplot about the Daily Planet being bought by David Warfield, who is definitely not at all Morgan Edge from the comics. Warfield puts his daughter Lacy in charge of the planet, who immediately takes a liking to Clark and kicks off a very annoying love triangle between Lacy, Clark, and Lois. However, by the end of the movie, Perry White manages to buy the planet back from Warfield anyway, at which point Lacy literally vanishes. This is the best I can summarize Superman 4 in a passing go. Later on, I will flesh out the beats from this movie in far more detail, because it needs it, but I felt like it was important that we have a baseline to work from with this movie because, Jesus Christ. I've gotten into the habit of discussing the history of the Superman films at the beginning of these reviews, because it's my opinion that context is always needed to understand why these films are the way they are. This could not be more the case for Superman 4. It would be easy to write this off as just a bad movie, but even with a little context, it becomes less a comedy of errors and more the tragedy of a vision squandered. It begins, as all Superman horror stories do, with Alexander and Ilya Salkind. Before Superman 3 was even in production, the Salkinds had their eyes on a fourth Superman movie. There are kernels of this in Ilya's original treatment of Superman 3, an insane piece of writing that I have covered before. But the Salkinds' production of a fourth Superman movie was contingent on Superman 3 performing well. If it didn't make money, then Superman 4 wasn't likely to either. As it would turn out, Superman 3 would do pretty respectably at the box office, earning $80 million over its run. However, the critical reception was notably pretty negative. The Salkinds geared up to produce Superman 4 anyway, but after their 1984 Supergirl film failed to capture the hearts of the general public, they came to the conclusion that the franchise had run its course. It couldn't be that they'd screwed up on the past two movies. No, it's just that the public didn't like Superman anymore. So, deciding that Superman wasn't worth it anymore, the Salkinds sold the rights to Superman movies to the Cannon Group in 1985 for a pithy $5 million. The Cannon Group was a group of companies that included Cannon Films, which was famous for pumping out B movies of various qualities. Their biggest claim to fame being a bunch of sequels of the Charles Bronson film Death Wish that were financially successful but heavily panned by critics. Clearly the sort of people you want to be the custodians for Superman, right? However, being sold to a film studio that specialized in trashy action B movies was not the only trouble ahead for Superman. The other major concern was regarding its star, Christopher Reeve. After the troubled production of the past three films, Reeve was understandably growing weary of the role and was hesitant to sign on to deal with this shit for a fourth time. He was also more interested in pursuing the production of Street Smart, a crime thriller that had been a pet project of Reeve's that had up until now failed to get any financial backing. Eventually, Cannon Films offered Reeve a deal. They would fund Street Smart if, in return, he came back to play Superman. To sweeten the deal, Cannon offered a few more perks. Reeve would be given $6 million, a degree of creative control over the story, as well as the ability to prove the director. This, alongside a promised budget of $36 million to produce the film, sold Reeve, and he agreed to come back. This creative freedom assured, Reeve decided that he wanted to use the film to express a concern he had personally for the world: nuclear disarmament and an anti-war statement in general.
We should think of ourselves, all of us, this world is Smallville, is a small town, and we should feel like neighbors. And if that idea sort of subliminally gets planted in kids throughout the world, then something can grow from that.
Christopher Reeve, more than a lot of people, really understood Superman and the power he has as an icon. Reeve wasn't even a Superman fan like that. He'd enjoyed The Adventures of Superman starring George Reeves on TV, but wasn't an avid follower of the comic books. But all the same, he had a grasp of the power of Superman that many others in production, particularly the Salkinds, did not. He understood what it meant for Superman to stand for truth, justice, and other stuff. His pitch about nuclear disarmament was nothing short of truly earnest, wanting to show the children of the 80s that a better way was possible, that things could change for the better if we all just worked together. Idealistic? Sure. But isn't that the point of Superman? To be hopeful for a better tomorrow no matter how bleak things look now? Unfortunately, before production could even begin, Cannon Films would go back on the vast majority of their promises to Reeve. The budget for the film was slashed by over half, dropping to about $17 million. The effects crew from the first three films were replaced last minute by cheaper alternatives. The promise of Reeve having final approval over the director was thrown out. Instead of Reeve's pick of Ron Howard, who was fresh off the success of Cocoon, Sidney J. Furie was placed at the helm for his reputation of delivering films on time and under budget. It actually really bums me out that Howard never got a crack at this movie. It may not have turned out as good as the first three due to budgetary constraints, but Howard is a reliable director. Even under a low budget, I'm sure he would have made it work somehow. With all these sudden constraints put on the film, Reeve could see the writing on the wall. John Cryer, who plays Lex's nephew Lenny Luthor, alleges that Reeve took him aside before the film was to be released and said in as many words that the movie was going to be terrible. And he was right. The film is an infamous disaster, panned by critics and making $50 million less than the previous film at the box office. So with this context in mind, let's look at the movie proper. This is the part of the video I was most dreading writing, because What is there to say? Over my past Superman videos, I've followed an identifiable format: the history, production details, and then the film overall. On Superman 3, I was able to break out of that because that movie was insane enough to fuel an hour's worth of yapping about all its moving parts. But I can't really dig into the production value in any real detail. I mean, look at it. We can see that the effects suck. We can see the sourceless and flat direction. It's also self-evident. But I really want to try and explain why this movie makes me more sad than anything else. So here goes. Right off the bat, we know we're in trouble as the opening credits are noticeably a lot rougher than in previous movies. The majestic space credits? Gone. Hell, I even prefer the stupid slapstick credits of Superman 3, because you could at least tell someone put some effort into it. Was it effort into the wrong thing? Sure, but it was effort nonetheless. However, another early indicator of the trouble we're in is in the score. Over the credits plays the most sourceless rendition of the John Williams March ever recorded. I just want you to think about this. How do you manage to make one of the greatest themes ever written sound this flat and dull? Boy, I'd hate to be the bum who worked on the score for this movie. Say, who is this loser anyway? Wait, what the fuck? For those unaware, Alexander Courage is a pretty prolific composer and orchestrator for both television and film alike. He worked as an orchestrator on films like My Fair Lady, and composed the soundtracks for television shows like The Waltons and an underground science fiction series you might not have heard of. A little thing called Star Trek.
60, 50, 40, 30. Gentlemen, I suggest you beam me aboard.
Courage's work on Star Trek is timeless. His theme for the series is one of the most recognizable themes in TV history. The incidental music he penned is equally iconic, enough that Futurama was able to use it to tee up a joke. This is a man who absolutely has the talent and the gravitas to pull off a Superman score. Hell, he was an orchestrator on the 1978 Superman movie when John Williams was writing. He is a bit overqualified to write a Superman score. So how is it that when it was his turn, his score was so completely sourceless? This is a pretty good summary of how this movie goes, actually. Acting-wise, at least, the film is still jam-packed with great talents. Chris Reeve, Margot Kidder, and Gene Hackman are still here, all great actors. Jackie Cooper is still here too, also a very good actor. Sam Wanamaker is here, for some reason. There is a lot of talent in front of the camera, but without fail, their performances fail to work. Jackie Cooper and Gene Hackman could not more clearly just not care. Their performances are bored and more phoned in than a charity drive. Hackman's especially. While his Luthor used to be bursting with Hackman's charm, now there's nothing. It's really weird to watch, actually. On the other hand, Reeve and Kidder appear to be trying their best with the material given to them, but they have absolutely nothing to work with, so the result is a net zero. It's really frustrating to watch, actually. The thing is, though, in terms of ideas, this movie actually begins on a pretty promising note. The opening piece of Superman action is a pretty okay scene involving him saving a cosmonaut from certain death after he's struck by debris while taking a spacewalk. By the admittedly low standards of this film, it's actually executed pretty decently, and contains the cute detail that Superman speaks Russian, which, duh, of course he does.
So, I study their languages.
How many languages?
All of them.
Now, sure, he does speak this Russian into the vacuum of space, and is somehow still perfectly understood by the cosmonauts, but hey, that's pretty classic Superman bullshit. I'm willing to look past that. I would have almost believed that this wasn't going to be as bad as everyone told me it was, if not for the fact that this composite of Superman flying to the rescue is used twice inside a minute. That's not the last time you're seeing that exact shot, by the way. In a spectacularly awful penny pinching moment, this one take of Superman's flyby will be used all over the movie. Actually, you know what? I lied earlier. Let's dig into why the effects here don't really work.
Frankly, this thing sucks.
I did say that we could just say, look at the visual effects as my whole argument as to why they're bad, but there is actually more to it than that. Now, there is the obvious thing that the flight effects have largely moved from the front production of the first three films to very dodgy blue screen compositing. But for my money, this isn't the only thing going wrong. Sure, these shots are technically pretty rubbish, but it's not just down to the dodgy composite work. It's also a problem with momentum. If we're being very honest with ourselves, there are a handful of dodgy flight shots in the first three Superman films, but they're never as immersion breaking as in this movie. Why? Because the speed of Superman's flight is always preserved. Superman is always fast, fast, fast. So a blink and you miss it shot from, say, the missile chase that hasn't aged as well as the shots around it doesn't break the immersion because it still looks fast. If the objects in frame seem to be moving at the speed you expect, your brain is going to be a lot more forgiving a dodgy shot or two. This isn't the case with Superman 4. This reused Superman flyby shot is painfully slow. Not only does this break the immersion of feeling like you're supposed to be watching someone traveling faster than a speeding bullet, but you can also see the rough edges of the composition for a lot longer, giving your brain all the more time to pick apart how rough it looks. Just as an experiment, I ran a couple of examples of this flyby shot in double time in my editor. It still doesn't look great, but you know, it's better. I think if it had been this fast in the movie, it really would have looked less shitty, just a little bit more forgivable. Losing the front projection technology was a definite blow against this movie, but with a bit more effort, the blue screen might have worked, or at least it could have looked less awful. Now, this doesn't rescue the model work in this movie, which is pretty dodgy, but the dodgy models aren't offensive to me. They're kind of cute, actually. It's really the blue screen that I think causes the most problems in making this movie look really cheap and lazy. That's my quick little theory anyway. Moving on.
All I do is sit down at the typewriter and start hitting the keys.
After Superman saves the cosmonauts, he returns home to Smallville, where he's selling his family farm. A fairly innocuous scene, right? Well, no. In fact, this scene is a pretty spectacular display of a lot of the problems this screenplay has, namely its laziness and its waste of potential. Let's talk about the latter point first, because it's more interesting to me. See, the bulk of the scene at the Kent farm is a conversation between Clark and a real estate agent, discussing who Clark wants to sell the farm to. The agent is trying to convince Clark to sell to a land developer who's out to build a shopping mall or something of the likes. Clark is adamant that this not happen, insisting that the farm be sold to somebody who would actually use the farm for its intended purpose. Now, there's a lot of potential here. Between this and the fact that the Daily Planet has been bought by a media conglomerate that wants to use it to push trashy tabloid rubbish to sell more, you could have a really cohesive story about the pitfalls of corporate entities crushing small businesses and genuine journalism. You could have a Superman movie that is actually trying to say something and have Superman go up against these ideas in his own way. But the movie never really gives these concepts proper time of day. The Kent farm sale is never mentioned again after this scene, and by extension, neither is Clark's friction with the real estate agent on the topic of who it's sold to. Even in this scene, the idea is quickly dropped in favor of a haha, isn't Clark a gigantic nerd joke. David Warfield's ownership of the planet and his push towards sensationalistic journalism only ever pops up when there's a joke to be made, like this gag where a paper says Superman told Jeremy to drop dead because Superman didn't immediately respond to his letter.
All Fred Jones had to say was,
I think Coolsville sucks.
The ideas are presented, then quickly dropped in favor of a joke. The script seems afraid of actually committing to saying anything of substance outside of the nuclear issue, which strikes me as a massive shame. With a bit of effort, I'm sure a good writer could have tied the threads of corporate interests to the nuclear problem with a sense of panache. For heaven's sake, it nearly does. Some weapons dealers pop up from time to time in Lex's evil scheme, acting sad they can't sell nuclear weapons anymore when Superman begins his crusade against them. You're literally one draft away from tying it all together thematically. Corporate interests are hurting the common man, be it through sensationalist media, the destruction of small towns, or nuclear bombs. You're so close. Please, just revise the goddamn script.
Now, where was I?
Somehow, that complete waste of potential isn't the laziest part of the scene. No, that comes later when Clark steps into the barn. See, there's this really bizarre restaging of the iconic scene from the 1978 film where Clark finds the control crystal in the ship he came to Earth in. This scene exists solely to give Clark the ship's energy module, which Superman's mother Lara helpfully tells us in voiceover can only be used once. This is a green crystal identical to the control crystal from the first two movies. Apparently, Clark has somehow never come across this before. Okay then. By the way, this one use of the energy module, it's to heal Clark of the radiation sickness given to him by Nuclear Man so he can rock up to the final battle. Hey, wait a second, this is literally the green crystal giving Superman his powers back in Superman 2. Were they really so unoriginal they had to find a way to redo a plot point from a previous movie? This is one of the chief troubles of the screenplay. It seems peripherally aware of continuity from the previous movies, but doesn't actually follow it up in any satisfying way or reuses bits from the continuity while forgetting what made it work in the first place. This is especially weird because Christopher Reeve himself helped write the story. He didn't have much to do with the screenplay, granted, but he was in the story writing process. He was literally there for the first three movies, Couldn't you have given a hand on the continuity front?
Oh, brother, this guy stinks!
As I noted in the plot summary, in this film, Lex Luthor has a nephew named Lenny, who is introduced to us helping his uncle break out of prison, which in Doctor Who style penny pinching is shot in a quarry. I hate Lenny Luthor.
I hate him! I hate him!
You guys know that one Simpsons episode where the TV execs want to improve the cartoon Itchy and Scratchy, so they add the new sidekick character Poochie to it, the dog who's supposed to be hip and rad and with the times, but ends up being the living embodiment of how do you do, fellow kids? Yeah, that's Lenny. Lenny is a human Poochie. There is literally a note somewhere in my notes for this movie that simply reads, I hope Lenny dies. The thing is, there's no depth to why I can't stand Lenny, because Lenny has no depth. He's not a character, he's a caricature of what the writers think the kids are into. He likes loud music, he dresses like a stolen car, he fixates on how any given situation might damage his drum set, he consistently calls Superman the dude of steel. And any scene Lex is in is saddled with Lenny's presence, because for reasons known only to the writers and possibly God, he's Luthor's henchman for this movie. This witless oaf, this buffoon. And sure, Lotus had about 2 brain cells and was Luthor's henchman in the first 2 movies, but Otis at least had a semblance of personality. Against my better judgment, I kinda like the guy. But there's no personality to latch onto with Lenny. He's just there, dragging down every scene he's in, reminding you with every line of the sheer utter laziness with which this script was written. If they wanted to give Luthor a nephew, fine, whatever, that's stupid, but this kind of shit happens in the comics. But if, for the love of God, if they were gonna do it, they should have put some effort in and made him an actual character. I hate Lenny. I wish he'd get hit by a fucking car.
Whoa! Touched a nerve there.
This might seem like a melodramatic response to such an inconsequential character, but to me, these characters are a sign of a deep-rooted cynicism. At best, they're the product of a writer genuinely trying to reach out to the youth, but having absolutely no idea what the hell they're talking about. But at worst, it's lazy, cynical pandering. It's really hard for me to work out which one of these Lenny is. Did Reeve come up with the character in earnest, forgetting the bit where he actually had to speak to the target audience? Did one of the other writers lazily tack Lenny into the proceedings, cynically talking down to the kids that Reeve was genuinely trying to reach with his "we need to look after each other" message? I genuinely can't tell, but Lenny kneecaps any impact the message might have. Instead of hearing the earnest message of peace Reeve wanted from this movie, the youth are more likely to be annoyed, offended even, at this lazy stereotype and stop listening. All anyone does with a Poochie character is alienate the demographic they're trying to reach. Anyway, let's move on. Let's see another classic piece of action. A driver on public transport has a heart attack, endangering many lives. A staple of superhero media. This time, it happens on the Metropolis subway. Wait a minute, is that the London Underground?
Why are they all called Milton? Anyway, I better go as far as Milton Keynes.
The production of Superman 4 largely took place in England. In of itself, not a bad thing. But the problem is that Metropolis was very obviously famously modeled after New York. Much of the first 2 movies was shot in New York. If you're gonna shoot Metropolis elsewhere, you're gonna have to put some effort into making it look like Metropolis. No such effort is made. The result isn't just that the alleged Metropolis Underground could not be more clearly the London Underground. That on its own is kind of funny. But the bigger result is the downsizing of Metropolis. The Daily Planet, which once appeared to take up a massive office block, is reduced to appearing like it's being run out of the 2nd floor of a warehouse. The city itself looks like a back street in a small town rather than a bustling big city. In a pivotal scene where Superman walked through Metropolis to the United Nations headquarters, there is absolutely no sense that this is what's happening. You don't even know it's the UN until he steps foot inside, at which point the set for the interior helpfully tells you this. What makes this worse is that, according to screenwriter Mark Rosenthal, Reeve and director Fury begged Cannon to let them film this in front of the actual UN, but Cannon, in their infinite wisdom, said no. And this is the result. The scope is completely lost. Metropolis no longer feels huge and lived in, it feels run down and falling apart. In a way, this is a nice metaphor for the movie itself, and its place in the Superman film series. The scope and the majesty of the first 2 films is gone, it's completely lost. Superman no longer feels larger than life. The world feels tiny and run down, the film itself feels small and almost tired. It's lost something crucial to what made it magical in the first place. This is what I meant earlier when I said this movie makes me sad. It is genuinely depressing to see the Superman film series in this state, having fallen so far from where it began. It hurts watching the crew try their hardest to pretend this back street is the same world as the massive New York street that the Daily Planet used to be on. We know it's capable of being so much more, but Instead, this is what we're left with. An echo of its former glory, trying desperately to have the same impact and meaning as what came before it. Oh man, we're not even 20 minutes through this shit, are we? It's also around this point that it becomes clear that this movie is very haphazardly edited together. Scenes cut from each other extremely clumsily and frequently extremely abruptly. Here's just a couple across the movie that I made note of. I did not mess with these in any way. This is how they appear in the film.
No, Superman!
Superman, the subject of our newest exhibit.
And this crapshoot editing isn't in scene chops either. Even the audio editing is astonishingly terrible.
Daddy thinks it's brilliant. Anyway, I want you to write this new
series. Wait a minute! Who are you?
Since I've just used footage of their introduction, let's talk about David and Lacy Warfield, our ancillary antagonists this evening. Well, one kind of antagonist and one pain in the ass. As I noted earlier, David Warfield is a discount Morgan Edge who has bought the Daily Planet to integrate into his media conglomerate. However, as opposed to Edge, who turns Clark Kent into a TV anchorman for the new WGBS News run out of the planet, Warfield wants to turn the Daily Planet into a cheap tabloid rag, in the interests of selling more papers instead of reporting the news.
If you think I'm gonna let you turn this grand old lady into one of your bimbos...
What the fuck did you just say, Perry? Now, in general, David Warfield doesn't actually do much in this movie aside from stand on the sidelines and go, oh, what a cunt I am. He's actually pretty much irrelevant until the end of the movie where Perry White buys the planet back from under him. How? Who cares? It's his daughter who, for better or worse, has more influence over this movie. Lucy is the Warfield who is in this movie more often, so she's the one we're more interested in. So what does she do exactly? Well, allegedly, she's the new editor of the planet under her father. However, she spends less time editing papers and more time chasing Clark. See, the moment our bespectacled dork walked into the room, she fell for him. He's so pathetic, she says to herself. I need him. Now, Lacy is the editor of this paper now. Clark is her employee, but rich people have never let little things like HR violations get in the way of a little office romance, so she devises plans to get Clark closer to her. The first of these plans is drafting him to write a series of saucy articles called Metropolis After Dark, which he would research by going into the nightclubs of Metropolis to see what's what, with Lacy by his side as his hot date, of course. Now, not to be a soft commie or anything, well, wouldn't this classify as workplace sexual harassment? Especially if you're giving Clark this assignment posted up on your desk like this? Hey, I mean, I guess when you're rich, you can get away with this shit scot-free, am I right, fellas? Too real? Too real. By the way, in the cut of the film as presented, this plot point involving Metropolis After Dark vanishes after this scene. It's never mentioned again. We never see any of these HR violation dates. But not to worry, we do get a lengthy sequence involving Lacy's next plan to spend time with Clark, which is a work group exercise day. It was about this point that I wrote in my notes, I am going to kill myself. Because what the hell is going on, man? By now, I'm sure you're beginning to catch on. Lacy doesn't have much of a character of her own outside of rich. Her function in this movie is to fawn over Clark and provide what I'm assuming is supposed to be some romantic tension in this film. This alleged tension comes to a head when Lacy and Lois Lane arrange a double date, with Clark as Lacy's partner and Superman as Lois's. This scene unfolds with grueling predictability until finally Lex mercifully interrupts to threaten to kill people. Lacy does have a hint of an arc across the film where she grows to appreciate real journalism and goes up against her father on the ethics of tabloid gutter trash, but this is framed as the good and just Clark rubbing off on her. She doesn't actually have any agency of her own. So this one attempt at character development falls completely flat, killed even further by the fact that it never actually resolves in the film. See, at the end of the film, she becomes a cookie-cutter damsel in distress when Nuclear Man decides he fancies Lacy and kidnaps her. So Lacy spends a little time going, oh no, then just disappears from the movie. In the finale where Perry buys back the planet, she's nowhere to be seen. Despite the fact that she's been the editor over the whole movie, there is no hint as to what happens to her now that Perry has the planet back. She's just gone. The movie literally forgets about her. Because God forbid she have any character of her own, right? Do you know how easy this is to fix, even in a half-assed shitty way? Just have Lois ask her, so what will you do now? And Lacy go, Perry offered me a job as a journalist and I'm taking it. I want to report the real truth. In a real actual movie, it would be a bit more fleshed out there, but I'm trying to be realistic to what this movie is. My point is, it would be so damn easy to just tie off her character in something almost approaching a satisfying way. But instead, she gets hit with the Chuck Cunningham ray and vanishes. Terrible.
I tune in this episode.
So, if Lacy isn't ferried so well, How's intrepid reporter Lois Lane doing? Better than she was in Superman 3? I mean, marginally, because at least time she's, in the movie. She isn't given anything decent to do, but, she's here. Overall, there isn't really much left of the strong-headed Lois we all remember from the first two movies. This persona makes some occasional guest appearances, such as when she quits the planet in protest of the Warfield sensationalist headlining, but beyond that, she doesn't wind up doing anything. There is an almost emotionally resonant moment between her and Clark towards the end, where Lois tries to comfort an extremely sick Clark suffering from radiation poisoning after fighting Nuclear Man, while Clark tries to reassure her that Superman will come back. This is a scene that in any other movie would be tragically beautiful, but the writing here can never really get there, rendering it somewhat hollow. Which is a shame because in scenes like this, you can see Margot Kidder is really trying to bring Lois to life the way she did in the first two movies. But she's not being given enough to do. It's frustrating. However, this isn't the weirdest of what happens with Lois in this movie. No, there's a scene in this movie that is not only weird, but paints Superman as kind of a dick. Almost evil, actually. By this point in the movie, Clark has already read Jeremy's letter to Superman about nuclear bombs and is pondering the topic. Lois comes to Clark's house while he's mid-ponder about something that never matters again in the movie. So, as one does, Clark grabs Lois and jumps off a roof with her to reveal himself as Superman to her. Again.
Clark, things aren't that bad. Clark, stop!
Ah yes, throwaway suicide joke in a children's movie. Always a classic. This whole thing is really weird on a couple of different levels. Let's run back to Superman 2 for a second to remember why Lois doesn't remember who Superman is in the first place. Oh, feels good to be watching a good Superman movie, doesn't it? At the end of Superman 2, Lois knew Clark's secret, but she couldn't live with the double life, finding that having to pretend that she couldn't talk to Clark every day was tearing her apart. Clark was also upset because he couldn't be with Lois and he didn't want to watch her suffer. So he erases her memory of his secret with the classic amnesia kiss. So why the hell would he go back on that and reveal himself to Lois again? He knows how it's going to affect her. Doing this is really, really selfish of him. He explains it's because she's the only one he can really talk to, but like, that's still pretty shitty of him, isn't it? Oh, but it doesn't matter because he erases her memory of it all again after taking her for a fly around the world to clear his mind. Hang on, so what the hell was the point of all that? We already know that Clark needed to ponder what he was going to do, so why do all this? Why did we spend so much time on something that, in the grand scheme of things, isn't going to have any impact going forward? If I were being charitable, I'd suggest that it means the human aspect, talking to Lois, grounded Superman's decision on the nuclear threat in a very human place, but that would be giving credit to the screenwriters for thinking this through. I'm not convinced this was that thoroughly considered. Also, this is more messed up now, isn't it? Clark just unblocking Lois's memory so he can use her as a sounding board for his anxiety, then wiping her mind again? That's pretty fucked up, isn't it? Has he done this before? How is this okay? How is this something that Clark would ever do to someone? Jesus Christ. You know what? I take it back. Between being treated like this or just not being in the movie, I think Lois fared better in Superman 3. This is insane. What makes this more depressing is that this is the last time we see Margot Kidder's Lois. This is the note she gets to go out on. Not getting much to do in the film besides getting played with by Superman and occasionally shout when the movie needs her to. It's depressing. A lot of this movie is really depressing like that. This is the note that the Reeve movies go out on? Well, we've managed to go this long without really talking about him, so let's talk about Nuclear Man. Well, he's in the movie. The major problem with Nuclear Man is that there's absolutely nothing to grasp hold of in terms of understanding the character, because he's not really a character. He's a plot device that has nuclear abilities, I guess, and looks like He-Man. He has absolutely no individuality. He's a non-entity. But I will try to engage with what we have here, because Nuclear Man, much like the rest of the movie, has fun ideas buried in a terrible, terrible execution. Now, you might be expecting me to take issue with how he's created. Oh, isn't it stupid that you can just shoot a hair of Superman's head into the sun in a nuclear missile and get a nuclear Superman clone? Thing is, I don't care about that. In fact, I think it's kind of cute. It does sound like the kind of stupid bullshit someone would have written for an issue of the Superman run in the 1970s. I can almost see the cover of Nuclear Man standing over a dying Superman with Luthor standing behind him saying something to the effect of, "You're finished, Superman! Not even your powers are a match for the might of my Nuclear Man." So, I don't mind that Nuclear Man is born from a hair, a nuclear bomb, and a sun. I don't mind that he looks like He-Man. That's kind of fun, actually. I don't mind the bit where he becomes instantly weak when removed from the sunlight. That's a fun idea. It's like an extreme version of how Superman is charged by the yellow sun rays, demonstrating that Nuclear Man is an imperfect clone of Superman. That's cute. I don't even mind that his powers seem to be divined from the whims of the screenwriters. Again, this is pretty standard comic book fare, I don't mind. Really, in all honesty, Nuclear Man is one of the more fun parts of this movie, but that doesn't come without bugs. The first one is that for some reason he has Lex Luthor's voice.
No, you have my voice.
I don't understand why. By all accounts in this film, Nuclear Man is only made up of Superman DNA, so there isn't really a reason for him to have Lex's voice at all. Now, if they dubbed over Mark Pillow with Chris Reeve doing a menacing voice, that would have made a bit more sense to me. I don't know, it's a weird choice to me. But the biggest problem to me with Nuclear Man is a similar problem I have to the rest of the movie. The ingredients never come together in a satisfying way. I love the concept of this cheesy nuclear clone of Superman who looks like he's about to belt out some twisted sister. But what does he actually do? Honestly, not much. I mean, he growls, he destroys stuff, he manages to wound Superman, he kidnaps Lacy Warfield for a bit of cheap tension and flies her out to space where she miraculously doesn't suffocate in the vacuum of nothing. But the problem is that beyond that, Nuclear Man is nothing. He's a bunch of fun concepts, but nothing is tying it all together. It's a massive shame, especially considering that I think I know where they were headed with this. See, this movie is about nuclear disarmament in general. So I imagine Nuclear Man was meant to be the living embodiment of the danger posed by nuclear weapons. You know, like Godzilla. Now, would this be about as subtle as a slice of lemon wrapped around a large gold brick to the head? Sure, but I don't think Christopher Reeve was out to be subtle when he was writing the story for this. So a deliciously on-the-nose human embodiment of nuclear devastation would still be a lot of fun. But the problem is, Nuclear Man fails to even be that, because he's not much of a threat. Now, sure, he does land a scratch on Superman that gives him COVID until the energy module from the ship this movie pulled from its ass saves him. But in the fight that precedes all this, Nuclear Man's damage isn't very nuclear. He knocks down the Great Wall of China, Superman just rebuilds it with his eyes. Wait, what the fuck? Nuclear Man detonates a volcano, Superman just plugs that shit up with a big rock. Nuclear Man doesn't feel like that big of a threat, really. If they wanted him to be a living nuclear disaster, wouldn't it make more sense for him to do some serious damage? I'm not suggesting this movie go as dark as the original Godzilla did, complete with scenes of mothers telling their kids they're about to die. But I think if we wanted Nuclear Man to be a genuine threat and double as a warning of the terror of nuclear weapons, he should have succeeded in permanently damaging something, like at least a block of a city, and leaving Superman only able to save people who still get radiation burns or something. That way, Nuclear Man isn't just the most 80s dude in town, he'd actually be kind of scary. And it's not like the Superman movies have never gone this dark. The San Andreas fault in the original movie would have ended in the murder of millions. Zod kills a good number of civilians in Superman 2. These movies can and have gone there. Why didn't this movie? It would have actually helped Reeve make his point. It really doesn't help that, in the end, Nuclear Man is pretty easily defeated. Superman shoves him into a nuclear reactor, which kills him, by the way. I know I mentioned this earlier, but Superman does just straight up murder Nuclear Man in the heart of a nuclear reactor. That's kind of fucked up. I mean, the movie had the right idea when Superman locked him in that lift on the moon. I feel like doing that again, but burying the bastard 1,000 feet under the moon's surface would have been less insane. Though that does raise the question, is it more terrible to straight up murder someone or leave them dormant for eternity? Maybe the nuclear murder is the more humane choice of the two. Still a wild way to kill off the main villain, though. However, he wasn't meant to be the only Nuclear Man in this movie. Yeah, that's right, let's talk about the Workprint Cut.
But it's just a super cut of us.
One thing you might notice about Superman 4 is that it's only 90 minutes long. This is strange because all the other movies have clocked in at over 2 hours, including Superman 3. So what happened? Why is this one comparatively short? Well, the story lies in test audiences. Originally, the movie actually clocked in at about 2 hours and 15 minutes, a little bit longer than 2 and 3, but shorter than any given cut of the 1978 original. However, apparently test showings for this longer cut were disastrous, so the call was made to hack out about 45 minutes worth of movie, which the executives at Canon thought would make it a better movie. They also were trying to sell more theater showings. The shorter the movie was, the more times you could show it. Clearly that worked out well for them. So what was in this 45 minutes worth of haphazardly removed footage? Well, on DVD releases, about a half hour's worth of these deleted scenes can be found, and they are illuminated. The major takeaway from these deleted scenes is that originally, Lex made 2 nuclear men. In an initial experiment using technology entirely on Earth, Lex creates a first nuclear man who comes out awkward and with the mind of a child, a riff on Bizarro from the comics. This nuclear man is sent out to kill Superman, and he finds Clark at a locale known as the Metro Club, where he's out on the town with Lacy as part of the Metropolis After Dark ploy Lacy is using to be close to Clark. Oh hey, that plot point didn't just vanish, they just cut the scene out that followed it up. Nice. Nuclear Man turns up at the club, killing a couple of bouncers in the process, but instead of immediately killing Superman, he instead falls in love with Lacy. Some sources suggest that Nuclear Man then proceeds to sexually harass Lacy. Some suggest he kills a random woman who was just out for a good time. At any rate, Clark does a quick switch to Superman to dispatch the first Nuclear Man, and after a short fight, Superman kicks him into a power transformer, which kills him. He just disintegrates. Skill issue. Now, if you've seen Superman 4, you know that when they make the He-Man Nuclear Man, Lex uses both Superman's hair and a sort of black powder he calls genetic material. This is what's left of the first Nuclear Man. Those are his ashes. At some point, and I'm being dead serious, Lenny swept him up and brought the leftovers to Lex like, dude, Superman wrecked this guy's shit. Apparently, Luthor has a mentality of waste not, want not, because he then proceeds to recycle the first Nuclear Man's ashes to help make the second Nuclear Man. Oh my god. This is kind of fucked up, isn't it? Now, this wild little subplot isn't the only thing excised from the movie in its final form. Jeremy, the kid who kicks off the whole nuclear missile plot, also gets a little more screen time, including a scene where right after getting his letters, Superman flies to his school to tell him in person he can't just get rid of nuclear weapons, which seems to explain why the Warfields printed that Superman tells kid to drop dead headline a bit better than the final movie does. This also seems to suggest the original intention was for Superman to decline Jeremy's request, feel bad for doing so, then soul search about breaking his oath to Jor-El re-interference in human history. There's also an extra part of the ending where Superman takes Jeremy up into the sky to show him that Earth is all just one world, and also a couple of extra destinations on Nuclear Man's tour of destruction in his battle with Superman. This includes a scene where he makes a tornado, and some child nearly gets Dorothy before Superman flies to her rescue. This kid, by the way, played by Chris Reeve's daughter Alexandra. That's cute. So the question is, would this 45 minutes of extra footage have made this a better movie? The answer is maybe. The stuff involving the first Nuclear Man and Jeremy, definitely. Those scenes are pretty necessary, I think, in filling some plot holes that, while aren't fatal to the point of the film, did make me laugh when I watched the movie for this video. It would really help the coherence of the film to have this extra stuff in it, so I believe it should have been kept, even if the footage of the first Nuclear Man looks pretty naff. I mean, it doesn't really look much worse than the rest of the film, so it's fine. The extra ending with Jeremy would have also been a cute little bow on the anti-war stance of this film. Remember how I said that Lacy just falls out of the movie right at the end? Well, we've got a deleted scene for that too, where Clark and Lacy say goodbye as Lacy moves on to do something worthwhile with her life. It's not as interesting as my quick and easy patch where she basically becomes a budget Cat Grant, but you know, it's something. Also, apparently Clark sells Lacy the Kent farm in this scene. That's cute. Either way, keeping this scene would have helped the movie quite a bit, as having one of its main characters get memory hold right at the end is pretty bad. However, some of the extra footage definitely would have hurt the film. See, part of the deleted footage was a remount of the scene in the first film where Kal-El was shot into space, the object of which was to remind you of the existence of the green crystal Jor-El placed in the ship. The implication being that the energy module in this film is meant to be the same crystal that grew the fortress. The crystal Clark already knew about. The crystal that had already been used to repower him in Superman 2. See, with this scene remount left out of the film, it has the plausible deniability of going, oh, it's a second green crystal that Clark had just never found this whole time. That's stupid, but you can go with it. But if you stick that flashback there and imply it's the same crystal, you're screwed. Because the audience knows that Clark already knows about that crystal and it's already been spent. So the audience would know it's impossible for that crystal to only have just been found and have any use. What I'm saying is cutting this flashback was a smart move. But the rest of the stuff that was cut, I reckon it should have stayed. If nothing else, it would have made the film a bit more coherent, and it's not like it was going to be any less silly without it.
Legalize nuclear bombs.
In pretty classic fashion for me, I've managed to get 45 minutes into this video without really bringing up the main theme of the film, the reason this movie exists. Christopher Reeve's hopes and dreams of making an anti-nuclear weapon film for the kids to see and take on board to make the future a better place. It might be no surprise to you all, but this is the part of the movie I have the most sympathy for. Unlike the vast majority of everything else, this is the part of the movie really, truly trying to say something. Trying to be a statement for a better world, a message of hope for the future. And incredibly, bits of it really work. The first part that really works is the reason Superman steps in to ban nuclear weapons in the first place. See, from the series at large, we understand that Superman has been forbidden by his space dad, and apparently this council of Kryptonian wankers, who I guess came along for the ride and have been here this whole time, to interfere with human history at large, especially in affairs that Jor-El reckons humans can sort out for themselves. Superman, at large, obeys this, except for when he's doing a bit of cheeky time travel because the woman he fancied tripped and fell in a hole. But then, a letter appears on his desk from a little boy begging for help, begging for a better tomorrow. And he can't ignore that. He can't ignore the desperate plea of a kid scared for his future. Because he's Superman. What I also find interesting is that in his plea to the Kryptonian Council, Superman says that the people of Earth are on the path of repeating the same mistakes as Krypton, implying that it was destroyed by war. This is an interesting little retcon to me, as the 1978 film implies that the disaster that befell the planet was a natural one. Did Reeve intend to imply that the changes that led to Krypton breaking itself apart were the consequences of massive wars in its history? That's interesting to me. If that's where he was headed with it, I'd have liked to see that fleshed out more. Tying Superman's drive to save the Earth from nuclear devastation, not just in his drive to give children a better future, but also in a feeling of not again, would have been really interesting. Once again, this movie almost gets there with a good idea, but doesn't do the legwork to flesh it out. So, Superman breaks this rule. He interferes in a massive way by just up and throwing out all the world's nuclear armaments into the sun. They're gone. Nuclear war is no more, right? No, because Reeve is smarter than that. He understands that just getting rid of the weapons doesn't get rid of the drive to build them, the underlying anger that causes these weapons to exist. Black market arms dealers continue to sell nukes under the table. Indeed, that's how Luthor gets his hands on one to make Nuclear Man in the first place. Superman might have given a grand gesture in the name of peace, but he hasn't actually solved anything. By the end of the movie, he realizes this. The biggest problem with this plot point is that we don't really see Superman's path in learning this lesson. We have the point A of, I will throw away all nuclear missiles, that'll fix it, and the point B of, it's not that simple. But the path between the points is completely missing. He's spent the whole movie bollocksing around with Lacy Warfield or punching Nuclear Man. He hasn't had time to learn this lesson, basically. Now, if Nuclear Man was more explicitly a nuclear metaphor as I detailed earlier, this wouldn't be a problem. Nuclear Man and the destruction he'd wreak in my quick Godzilla rewrite would demonstrate in no uncertain terms that just getting rid of the bomb doesn't fix the problem. So long as there is incentive to build devices to blow each other up, we will. This complete lack of substance in Superman's path on learning his lesson about war should mean that the resolution feels completely unearned and hollow, but somehow it doesn't. Superman's final speech to the world regarding war is a little trite. It's a lot trite, in all honesty. But something changes here. Suddenly the movie is completely, totally honest. Reeves said in an interview that he wrote the words to this final speech himself, and it shows. While Reeve has been trying to get a good performance out from under a bad movie for the rest of the runtime, here he's almost dropped character, just speaking directly to the audience.
We're still a young planet. There are galaxies out there, other civilizations for us to meet, to learn from. What a brilliant future we could have. And there will be peace. There will be peace when the people of the world want it so badly that their governments will have no choice but to give it to them. I just wish you could all see the Earth the way that I see it. Because when you really look at it, it's just one world.
In doing so, Reeve demonstrates in no uncertain terms why he was this bloody good as Superman. Even in a speech that he wrote that is basically reading out of character as his own beliefs, he still embodies Superman. That hope for a better future, that belief that we can get there. Even out of character, he still just is Superman. It is so moving that against all odds, despite the shit show this movie is and the many, many failures it has, it works. Reeves' message of hope and peace communicates. Superman 4 is nowhere near the film Reeve wanted it to be. It's an underfunded disaster with little to no plot, poorly executed characters, and tragic effects. It swung for a great height it could never achieve, leaving the leftovers of the good movie it was trying to be, trapped under a mountain of studio interference and disappointing blue screen. And yet, despite all that, Reeves' intentions shine through. Somehow. This film still makes me sad with its squandered potential, but this last speech works. And I respect Reeve for pressing ahead with getting the film produced, despite the insurmountable odds stacked against him. And I think it's this honest drive to make a difference that is why a lot of people like this movie more than I do, and have been doing work to try to restore it to as close to a truly good movie as it can possibly be. I don't think there's a version of Superman 4 as shot that can ever be as good as the first two Superman films, but that hasn't stopped other people from working on them. There is a channel on YouTube called A Price Production. The channel owner, Aaron Price, has a pet project, a fan edit of Superman 4 that, using the technology available to us today, tries to create new visuals for Superman 4 to at least make it feel like it takes place in the same grand universe as the first two Superman films, painstakingly painting Milton Keynes out of shots and replacing it with new matte paintings of New York, editing the London Underground to actually look like the New York Metro, all new digital effects shots to make Superman as fast as a speeding bullet again. There's also some fun creative license. The scene where Superman looks at the Great Wall of China so hard it fixes itself is drastically edited, so now Superman fixes the wall at super speed, then uses his heat vision to weld it all together. The results are incredible. It looks far more complete than the original movie, and some of his clips are genuinely exciting to watch. If a team were given full studio backing to complete a full film edit, with Price overseeing based on his personal edits, there could very well be a version of Superman 4 that, while not being on the same majestic heights as the 1978 original, would be truly enjoyable and able to live up to Reeves' initial intentions for the film. The screenplay problems would be baked in still, mind you, but you still have a far better picture of what Reeves intended. While I can't say I'm in a hurry to watch the film again as is, if such a project got off the ground, I'd be the first one out there fighting for it to be seen in theaters. Think of it. Superman 4 remastered. It wouldn't reinvent the film, but I think it would mean more people would be able to appreciate what it was trying to be. However, in my grand journey with these original Superman films, I've missed something. Another film that the Salkins are responsible for, one that stars none other than Kal-El's cousin.